Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's Technical Thursdays Repository Adapter Configuration and Usage web seminar hosted by the Actuate Xenos Group. This program is being recorded. We hope you enjoy the program, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. Now, if you're having any difficulty logging into the web presentation, you may reach VisionCast Web Technical Support by calling 888-334-0282, or you can call 719-457-2792. Now, all audience lines will be in a listen-only mode during the program. However, you are encouraged to submit web questions throughout the conference as you think of them by clicking on the Q&A link at the top of your screen. A box will appear on the screen in front of you. Simply type in your question and then click on the Ask button. Our speaker will be addressing web questions at the conclusion of today's presentation, and any web questions that are not addressed within our available time frame will be answered by way of a post-conference email. Now, to view today's web presentation at full screen, which is highly recommended, especially during the live demonstration, please press the F5 tab on your keyboard, or you can locate the Maximize Screen icon located in the lower right corner of your screen console. You can simply press F5 again if you would like to ask a web question. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Joining us today is Will Davis, Sales Engineer at Xenos. Will has been in the information solutions industry for over 10 years and has worked at Xenos for over 8 in a number of capacities, including professional services, product development, product management, and most recently, sales and marketing. He has designed and implemented systems for financial services, insurance, ports, manufacturing, healthcare, and telecommunications. Xenos designs, stores, and delivers high-volume print of electronic documents for top-tier organizations in financial services, insurance, telecommunications, and utilities. And now for opening remarks and introductions, I'm happy to turn the program over to Will Davis. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Kathy. I really appreciate that intro. That wasn't Kathy, that was Jerry. Okay, it's all good. Really appreciate that. I'm just going to flip over to the agenda slide here. Today we're going to be expanding on the previous training sessions and utilizing our repository services to hit up what we loaded in last time. Now, we loaded into FileNet P8 last time, but unfortunately that server isn't up right now for us. There were some issues there. So we're going to be using on-demand, but the actual usage of the repository services are going to be the same. So we don't really need to worry about that. So we'll go ahead and do that. What we're going to do is we're going to query for documents based on some search criteria, and then we're going to retrieve those documents, and then we're going to write those out to disk. Now, this, like I mentioned earlier, while this is going to be using the on-demand adapter, it would be the same for P8, or it would be the same for Documentum or whatever else. So I'm just going to share my desktop here. And you can hopefully see my desktop here. So just to give a brief background on the repository services and how they work, the repository services are essentially a layer that sits on top of Enterprise Server, which offers up method calls to various repositories without having to change how you actually call the web service, the repository services web service. So if you wanted to retrieve a document or retrieve its resources, retrieve a hit list, you can query for its fields. You can also see what adapters are available or which repositories are available. And you can also load a document through this interface. So that web service sits on top of Enterprise Server, which has a number of components which can be configured with inside of it, such as IBM CMOD or FileNet Image Services or FileNet P8 Documentum, the Xenos repository, which you'll find out about in a few weeks, CMS, or the repository services API. So the advantage of doing this is you have a layer on front of Enterprise Server that you don't have to rewrite code for whenever you change an adapter on the back end, because Enterprise Server sits in between it. But because we also have Enterprise Server sitting in between, you can do transformation, you can do process flows, you can integrate with other systems, and essentially just work with the document however you want to work with it after pulling it out. So that's just a brief backgrounder on it before we get into the actual training session. We're going to start off with the same directory structure that we started off with before. Just like before, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to add the solution that we had set up previously. The only reason I keep on doing this is just to show you guys that, if this was a different person giving the training, they could just go into this configuration repository as well and pull this stuff out. And then once they're done, they can check stuff in and do whatever they need to do. So just to quickly go over what we did over the previous few sessions, we set up an event which listens for files on a directory. We then kick off a process flow, which then, once a file is dropped into that directory, we kick off the process flow, which then transforms it from AFP to PDF. We split up that PDF into multiple files based on or indexing within the transformation project itself. We can see that is occurring here. And then we're loading P8, and we're sending off a mail process to let us know that this actually occurred successfully. So that's what we did previously. This one's actually going to take it in a different direction, so to speak. We're going to set up an adapter, which is going to then hit up these documents that have been loaded. Now, like I mentioned, these have been loaded into P8, but we're going to be going against on-demand just because P8 isn't up right now. I'm just going to close out of these. And the first thing that we want to do is, just like everything else, we want to create a component which enables us to connect to on-demand. So if we just go into, same as before, right-click, go to Components, go into third-party connectors here under IBM. On-demand, we'll just use the on-demand repository adapter here. We will use the wizard, give it a name, go through the wizard like we have before, which will hopefully make this a lot easier. We'll allow the adapter queries. So these are just names, brief description. Allow adapter queries. So once this is loaded into Enterprise Server, it can be queried. So it's going to make itself available to be queried so you can find out field names and stuff like that. Just going to give it a username and password. You're going to have your own. Ours is admin and on-demand. If you wanted to connect to our server, which you're probably not going to, but I'm going to add a folder here. This folder is directly related to what's actually in on-demand. So if I quickly bring up on-demand here and go into the administrator here, for the screen size, and I connect to this one, we will see a bunch of folders that we have access to, or applications. So we can see Best Bank here, and we can see various information on this. So here's load information, has an account number, a name, and a statement date associated with that. So we're going to utilize this for searching and whatnot later on. I'm just going to click Cancel. Go back into here. So set up the folder to Best Bank. I'm going to give it an alias name of BB. Bank again. And this is actually where we set up if we wanted to do a transformation afterwards, we could give it a post process to run. So when we pull a document out, we could run it through this post process, which could then transform it or maybe combine it with other data and whatever else. We're actually not going to utilize this time. And we can also set up a hit list. So depending on how you're going to use this component, obviously you're probably going to want to get a hit list out of a search, and then you're going to, once you get that hit list, you're then going to want to grab that document out of the repository. So what this enables us to do is, for one, set the maximum number of hits that will be returned. You obviously don't want to return, say, like 100,000 documents to the user, just because that's going to take a long time to retrieve and send back. So we'll just set this to a mediocre 200. Now, if if after this timeout, which is 0, so it's not going to time out, we'll return back we can either return back a partial list of what has actually been caught so far, or we'll just throw an error. We're just going to return a partial result set. Click next. It's just going to give me a summary, and I'm going to click finish. And it's going to open this up. And there's a couple things that we're going to need to set up within here. One is the ODWEC home. Because we use ODWEC to connect, you're going to want to we're going to point to that particular, we're going to point to the ODWEC installation. So if I go into, here it is. This is my directory for ODWEC. You can define your own if you'd like. And if we have to set up anything else, I'm sure it'll give us an error later on, but if we can actually find anything that we do need to set up here. So, not sure if you guys are aware, but right now I'm actually sitting in a room with 2 people from marketing who are just sitting here and they're whispering to each other. That's why I'm kind of a little distracted here. And they're making little waving noises to each other, and I don't really know what's happening. But anyways, that's why I'm a little distracted. My apologies. Hopefully this should all work out fine here. So I'm just going to save this, and hopefully that's been set up properly. But an error will be thrown later on if something happens. So the next thing you want to do is, once that's set up, you can deploy this to your server, and then you can hit up the repository services web service API, and you can send in different things. And these are some of the methods: retrieve document resources, retrieve hit list, field query, query adapters, and load document. You could easily, you can also look into our documentation to see all the methods, or you could also look at the WSDL itself. Connect to the WSDL. So we have this set up. Now we're just going to actually call this from a process flow, just because it's a lot easier and it shows it a lot better than me just using SOAP UI or something to connect to the web service. So I'm going to create a new component here. I'm going to go under processes, samples, and we're going to see a couple different samples here. We're going to see the repository adapter sample WS client. We're also going to see the repository adapter sample client. These are both pretty much the same, just one goes through the web service and one goes through the adapter through the back end. So I'm just going to use the sample client here. You can actually find the code for both of these in our file system, and I'll show that to you in a second here. Finish. I'm going to create that. If you want to see the sample code for that stuff, you can just go under C:/Xenos/framework process repository, and here are the Java files, the component defs, and everything that you require to actually create those components. Change them if you'd like to, and recompile them. Close that. To go back in here, so we have a sample here. Now we have to connect it to that repository adapter that we just set up. So I'm going to, so the first thing we have to do is give it the service config, which is under web training. And components, connect to ODE.x on demand adapter. Bit of a mouthful, but we can see that it's actually just pointing to this one right here. Type today. Oh my. There we go. Connect to on demand. There we go. We're going to give it a username and password. So yes, we did already give it a username and password over here, but this was for the initial connection. So if you had users logging in outside of this, they could just log in. So that's just for the initial connection to initialize it, and then you have your users logging in maybe through a web interface or whatever else. You can actually pass through that information here. I'm just going to use the same ones, though, admin and on demand. You'll notice that the password isn't hidden here. That's just because this is a sample component, so you probably wouldn't use this in production anyways. I'm going to go after the alias of best bank. So this sample client can do two different things. It can either retrieve a document or it can search for a hit list. So if we retrieve a document, you have to give it a document ID and it will retrieve the document and its resources. Or you can give it search criteria and it will search for through specific fields and return a hit list. So in this particular case, we're actually going to just search for name. Through the name field, we have a number of operators that you can use, and we have value and value too. So if you were searching for a date between two specific dates, you would use both of these, and you would use the between or not between, depending on what you wanted. But because we're using like, we're only going to use this first one here. Okay. So what this is actually going to do is it's actually going to go in there, and it's probably going to return everything. So I can quickly test that here. If I execute it, it's going to run. No error. So we're just going to look through this and see why it's actually giving an error here. Connect to on-demand alias DB. So ideally, you want to search through this log and actually see why it's actually doing this. Connection cannot be established to the server. The reason it cannot be established is because we actually didn't give it the IP address. So we're just going to go back over here to the repository adapter. We're going to go into the connection factory and fill in server name or IP, which somehow managed to elude us earlier. So I have this copied here, just so I can copy and paste it. I'm going to save that. Whenever you make a change to the repository adapter itself, you just have to make sure that you stop it over here. Otherwise, the changes won't be put into effect. So I'm just going to stop it, and I'm going to re-execute it. And then I'm going to go back over here and rerun. And hopefully this time we won't get, okay, cool. We didn't get an error this time, and we can see that we actually get a fairly large hit list back of all, well, 29 documents. It's actually a duplication of multiple documents, but whatever. So what we can see here, this actually produces a hit list, but we can also see this within the log. We can see the doc ID is the very first thing here. The next thing we can see is the extension, which is AFP, and we can see the actual hit list values. So April Black is the name, this is the date, and we also see the account number. So those are the values within the repository itself. So this is working properly. We could definitely narrow down these search results if we wanted to just put in April here. So maybe that's what we'll do. We'll save that, and we'll execute it again. And now we'll see that we only have 2 hits back, both for April Black, both the same statement because I ran the loader twice. Next, what you might want to do is you might want to actually pull the documents. So in this particular case, what we can do is we can pull specific documents. So I'm just going to copy this. Just going to copy that ID for now. So we can use that ID. We can just put it directly in if we wanted to, and that will work. But you'd probably want to use a variable or something along those lines because you're not going to create a constant all the time. So I'm just going to call it doc ID. Save it, and I'm going to close this. So that's all well and good, but you're probably not going to actually execute that each and every time from within that pane. What you're going to do is you're going to want to set up a process flow or something along those lines to actually process the data afterwards. So I'm just going to right-click again, and I'm going to create a new process flow. Click Next. WS request. Let's just assume that it's coming in through a web service or whatever else. I'm going to click Finish. And now we're going to be given this palette again, which you've seen before, and we're going to use again. So we created this component. We're going to want to drag it on here. Query adapter component. If I query this on here, I can just connect it and save it. And I can execute it like this. Give the job variable, which I think was doc ID, and a value. If I execute this, it's going to run. Hopefully we have a document. We do. Now this is AFP, so it's not going to show up very well. But what we can also see is that there's a hit list, and that comes out as XML as well. So if you wanted to maybe do something additional with the hit list, you could do that. So, anyways, so now that we have these documents, there's a number of things you can do with this. You can do a transformation. You can run it through the rest of the process flow. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to write these out to disk, and maybe that'll be picked up by a later process. I could easily transform it as well, but I don't have a transform project created, and I didn't want to throw you guys for too much of a loop here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag on the file process. Okay, and I'm going to drag on another file process as well. Click OK. I'm just going to connect it into the flow as you guys have seen me do before. And then I'm just going to rename these. So query and retrieve. Process. Write out list. One will be write out. So as with before, we have source xdocs and result xdocs. So when we look at this process flow, we know what's a consumer and what's a producer. The query and retrieve is obviously isn't going to bring in anything, but it is definitely going to produce. It's going to produce hit list. It's going to produce resources, and it's going to produce AFP. This next one here, write out hit list, which is a file process. It's going to be a consumer, so it's going to write out. So that's going to take in the hit list, and write out AFP is going to take in the AFP. If we look at the result xdocs for the query and retrieve component, we can see that we have a document, we have resources, and we have a hit list. And those are all set as their appropriate name within the resulting memory. So I'm just going to click OK. I'm going to modify the write out hit list to utilize that hit list memory object. Okay. And same with the AFP. I'm going to do the exact same thing here. Choose the document. Click OK. And now I just need to give it names. So I go into directory here. Give it an output directory. Copy that over into here. I'm going to append a unique ID. I'm going to write out the AFP to the same place, only we'll put that AFP. And append a unique. Click OK. Click OK. Save it. And now when I run this, it's going to create those outputs, hopefully. It's just going to create this variable, keep this variable the same because I didn't copy down the other one. And when I execute it, we can see that the XML gets created. If I open that with Internet Explorer, apparently doesn't want to open it. Put into here. One of the problems with working with such a small screen. We'll put this into here. We can see that hit list again. It only has 2 documents inside of it, both for April Black. Like they're actually the same ID and everything. We have that in there. And we also have this AFP, which I'm not sure if it's actually going to open properly. Go into that loop. One of my AFP viewers are going to work. So you can see the AFP is actually being pulled properly. It's April Black's. That's all well and good. So that's kind of just a quick training session on how this stuff works. Wrong one. Go back into here. But just to reiterate what we went over here quickly, we set up a component which connects to on-demand. This component could easily be a FileNet P8 adapter. It could be an on-demand adapter. It could be Documentum. It could be a Xenos repository, or it could even be a custom one that you wrote yourself. So we set this up. It connects to on-demand, and you can query it. You can retrieve hit lists. You can retrieve the fields that are in there, what kind of documents are stored in there. And you can also retrieve the documents themselves as well as load a document in, all through that one interface. So we created that. And then we set up just a sample client, which is going to connect to that. So while that adapter could be utilized through the sample client or your own code, you could also go through a web service. But we just set up the sample client, and we connected to that. We gave it some search criteria. We gave it a doc ID, and that was good. And that could be called from anything, or you can put it into a process flow, which is what we did. So we put it into a process flow. We queried. We retrieved. We wrote out the hit list to a file, and we wrote out the AFP to another file. Of course, all the advantages of having a process flow and enterprise server exist here. So if you did want to utilize transformation, or if you wanted to zip it up and send it somewhere else, or whatever you want, or even load it into another repository such as FileNet P8 or On-Demand or Xenos, you could do that as well, just all within this process flow. So we did all of that in 25 minutes or thereabouts, so fairly easy to do with our drag and drop environment. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to take some questions now, I guess. Is that what's happening? Am I asking the questions myself? That's good. So we'll open up the floor to questions now if you have any. I'm going to close this email. So first question that came in was, could we use this for transformation as well? And yes, you can actually utilize this for transformation as well. This was a really simple process flow, but you could easily just drag on the AFP to PDF project if you wanted to, since we stored AFP. You could transform that into PDF if you wanted to. You could transform that into XML as well if you wanted to, which you'll see in future training sessions. So what this really enables you to do is actually remove the requirement of being able to work with whatever's stored in the repository, because you can pull out whatever you want. If you want to, even though it's AFP, if you want to pull out XML or CSV, you could easily do that. Next question. So last time you set up the on-demand, or last time you set up the P8 loader, and this time you set up the on-demand adapter. Why is that, and how much different is it to communicate with P8? Well, that's a good question, and I kind of alluded to that earlier. Yes, I am working with on-demand this time. Our server's down. I can't really control our environment. But connecting to P8 is just as simple as going into the components and same place as before, third-party connectors, IBM. We can see FileNet here. If I just open this up, I'm not sure if the wizard's actually been set up here, but click Finish, and you can see that's pretty much the same. We have this resource handler, which I didn't really go over. So this resource handler exists in all of our adapters. This resource handler enables us to cache resources so we don't have to pull them all the time from on-demand. So it really lowers the retrieval times. So we have our own internal code that does that, our own algorithms that do that. We also have a connection pool. So just like the on-demand adapter, you just set up the initial connection, the connection factory, et cetera, and you would connect to it through the exact same ways, so either through web services or through our other stuff. We have another question here. Can you retrieve documents across multiple document types? You can. Not sure. You definitely can, and it really all just comes down to the folder locations and how you set that up. Multiple folder locations and multiple applications. So there's just a folder here. So you can add multiple folders if you'd like to, and that enables you to connect to multiple folders, obviously, and query those multiple folders, and then bring them out. So sometimes you want to go across multiple object stores or multiple folders. We can do all of that within the adapter as well. Of course, when you do add in those multiple things, we can query against those as well, and that's going to increase the query length of time just because we are querying across multiple different things. Okay, so I think we'll cut it right there. We'll answer the rest of your questions via email. Hopefully that'll be good for you guys. I'm just going to go back into our presentation here. I'm going to stop sharing, and it's going to take me back into PowerPoint, hopefully, or maybe it won't, and I will just, there we go, bam. We have the agenda slide here. So the next training session, we're going to show you how you can reduce the storage costs of PDF using the PDF DSR component. So loading, I'm not really quite sure if we're going to load P8 or if we're going to load on demand, but we'll figure it out as we go along. But ultimately, hopefully by now you've realized that it doesn't really matter which way you go with this. It's going to be the same, just a component within a process flow, and wherever you're going doesn't really matter because it's all just configuration to go to that within that one component. So we're going to do that. What I also want to mention is because it is summer, things start winding down at a lot of companies. I know I have a couple weeks of vacation coming up, and so does some of my coworkers, so I have to assume that's the same across everybody else who would be attending these. So we're actually not going to have fixed times for these recordings. We're going to record them on our own and post them to the website and, of course, send out the email like we have been previously. That's really just to hopefully work around your schedules because everybody's busy and we just want to make it easier for everybody instead of forcing you to come to this time on a Thursday and so on. So that's pretty much it. I don't think I have anything else to add. Oh, next slide. Actually, the next slide we don't want to go to because, I see. Contact us. There we go. Yes, if you could contact us if you have any questions or ideas for future training sessions. We're definitely willing to accommodate those because, if you can tell, I'm kind of running out of ideas. So my name, Will Davis, wdavis@actuate.com. You can go to our website, www.zenos.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, email info@zenos, or you can even follow our wonderful blog. It's completely up to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This does conclude today's Technical Thursdays Repository Adapter Configuration and Usage web seminar hosted by the Actuate Zenos Group. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful day.